Welcome back, everybody, and welcome to a very special guest that I'm extremely honored to have on the channel, which is a real witch, a reading witch. Welcome, Ola.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's very, very cool to be having this conversation.
That's fantastic. This is your first collaboration on YouTube, or?
I actually did one with Abby from the channel Abby Salter. We
Cool.
were different people from different countries reading in English. So that was the theme.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right. But I mean, I'm a fan of your channel and I'll link it below and everyone should definitely subscribe.
Thank you.
Why don't you tell us little bit more about your channel, what you're doing apart from reading and witchcraft?
Sure. So my name is Ola. Actually, my name is Orsola. I'm Italian. I call my channel The Reading Witch because I decided to play with tarot cards and books and stuff together. So sometimes I did tarot readings about where this series is going to go. I did for Malazan and stuff like that. And it's pretty fun for me. So that's basically the basic gist about my channel. But in life, I'm a graphic designer. And that's basically what I do. I live in the mountains and I love nature. And I have a fluffy cat.
That's pretty cool. All right. So once again, thank you very much for actually coming on this channel. And today we're going to talk a bit about tarot and magic and stuff like that. I, however, have already worked hard, by which I mean I went and bought beer. So now I'm thirsty, so I'm going to have beer while we're talking. Ooh, cheers.
Cheers. I have water, so.
Well, I have to be creative later on, so I need to start getting my creativity back, I guess. All right. So I wanted to talk to you a bit about the witchy part of your reading witch identity and your tarot cards and stuff like that, and see how that ties into your reading and your reading of fantasy and Malazan in particular.
Sure.
So yes, you call yourself a witch, and what do you understand? How do you define that for you? What do you mean by you are a witch?
So, first of all, I think I need to say that it's a very loose term that I use. And part of the reason why I use it is because I come from a very Christian background. And I was called actually a witch in an offensive way for many years of my life, especially when I was a kid and I asked too many questions in church, which was obviously terrible. A little curious girl is definitely a witch, you know. So I guess that was part of taking that back for me, and also a cheeky, funny way to define a little thing that I do with tarot and just play with that kind of stuff that I find interesting and fascinating. I don't love rules, and I do not love anything that as an institution and codified stuff. So I definitely have a problem with the institution of church more than anything about Christianity or any other religion. I do not like rules. I mean, I think that you can relate to that at least.
All right. So you already said that you play around or you use tarot cards, you do tarot readings. Do you do also like other things that can be seen as magical, like divination, like, I don't know, astrology or?
So, yeah, I actually studied everything with astrology because some people that I knew that are friends of my mom introduced me to astrology and birth charts, and I was absolutely fascinated when I was way younger. And yeah, so astrology was the first thing. I don't use astrology as in daily horoscopes. That's not really the thing. I think that's a little bit a stretch personally. I like the idea of birth charts as in a way to better understand something. You probably will see in many things that I'm going to say about this and my witchy life, let's call it, that for me it's a lot about looking deeper into things and understanding better stuff. So it's a little bit different than, oh, I predict your future. And after astrology came tarot, and after tarot, I got interested in crystals, and after that, even a pendulum. I got a pendulum a couple of years ago, and it's a fun little thing. Just a very simple, to be honest.
Yeah. All right. Um, like now that's like an interesting thing that you said that you started with astrology, but more with like birth charts and stuff like that, which is, you know, what people used astrology, I don't know, in like say the 17th, 18th century, when people were taking this like where it was like a more important aspect, I guess, of
Yeah.
daily life, and birth charts were like very much the thing then. And it's not like your daily, like you're gonna meet someone interesting today.
Yeah.
Also, good time to make new friends or whatever they say these days. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Today is going to be a rough day at work. You don't say.
Exactly. That's I could write those.
Yeah. I mean, that could be. So a fun fact that not most people know is that those horoscopes are based on an ideal, let's call it birth chart. So if everything would set in a way, that would be the reading that you might get, even the most professional ones, because you could not, even if you tried, read for every single person and put that on a magazine or something. That is impossible. So they do not work. Even if they would work, they can't work for everyone. I don't know if I made sense, but I tried.
Yeah.
Yeah, so birth charts are different and I like them.
I see. Now that's like now that's like an interesting thing. Like I'll still stay a bit with like the more personal stuff, if that's fine with you. And if not, then you can just say, no, I don't want to talk about that. So my question now is, you said that you like ask a lot of questions, and that was not really something that, you know, was appreciated in the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
Which I I kind of understand. I'm technically baptized Catholic as well, but
Good stuff.
but like, so the question is, we obviously live in a like times where you often have this idea of a very scientific anti like atheist. I don't want to combine them as like, but people that see themselves as very scientifically minded despise everything that they call superstition, whether it is religion or astrology or tarot or any of these things. And how do you like connect, you like feel your, I'll call them beliefs in this case, or whatever you want to call them, when it comes to stuff like tarot and astrology, as like other tools to help you navigate this, this thing that we call life? How do you, you know, connect those with the fact that we live in a world where science at least has some place, so to speak?
I have a pretty, I have my mind set on something there, because the way that I always go about this is I think that most things that we call magic or paranormal or occult today are things that we do not really understand or can explain with science. And some of the things that we now call science were things that back then, many years ago, were called magic, paranormal, witchcraft, and all that stuff. And people would get burned because they did something that maybe now we discovered being medicine or electricity or whatever. So you can see this as a stretch. Probably some people do. Some people say, yeah, maybe you're right, but I don't know. This is the way I go about it. Maybe one day we will find out that there are actually different dimensions, and well, we connect with this person in dreams and why we know this or that. And I don't know. That could be science behind it. That's the way I go about it. So I am a very, very interested person in science. I loved all that stuff, chemistry, astronomy, or other than astrology. So I, so yeah, I have various interests, and I do believe that it all, in a way, could be considered the same, but not quite yet, if that makes sense.
So you're a follower of Saint Arthur Clarke when it comes to that. You know, there's a saying that any sufficiently advanced technology will look to other people like magic.
The moment you start putting rule on things, I'm not becoming a follower anymore because I don't like rules. I told you.
Well, it's not a rule. He just, I don't even know
Yeah,
where it
I was
said that.
joking. No worries.
Oh, I get you. I'm not exactly a fan of rules. I can tell you that. But yeah, so you basically you just use things that work for you, and you don't, really put them into some kind of full-on framework, because that would once again go against your like, you know, your I don't know, dislike for rules.
Yeah, it all grew very organically for me, and
Mhm.
it just evolved. And the more I learned things, the more things were maybe told to me or just shared with me. I really like to pick and choose, honestly, which might be convenient, but that's how I do it, and that works for me. So at least I admit that.
So it's a very eclectic, individualistic school of witchcraft that you just made for
Definitely.
yourself.
And I'll be honest, in the very beginning, when I started reading tarot when I was 17, I am 28 today. So it was a kind of quite some time ago now. I
Mhm.
started looking into this modern witchcraft kind of
Mm.
philosophy thinking stuff, and I was very turned off because they were cultish and I did not like it. So I decided, no, I'm going to just experiment with this and see where it brings me, where it carries me, and
Mm.
that this is where.
Experimental witchcraft, not theoretical witchcraft.
I mean, I'm not sure it's the correct word, but that's how it feels to me.
I mean, well, I guess that's like the thing that is, I don't know how we deal with a lot of things these days. It's like we try to figure out what works for ourselves, what works for us, and then we just go with that.
Yes.
And if that includes tarot, then that includes tarot.
Yeah. And
Um,
I must say that I'm like that in many things. I always, whenever I was gifted a new like board game, I would never read the instruction. I was just playing it and fucking with that and see where it was going to go. And often it was a mess and I need guidance maybe, but that's my approach.
that's my approach to building up IKEA furniture. I can tell you that.
Awesome.
But so yeah, you said you started with astrology because some friends introduced you to that,
Yeah.
and then you moved on to tarot. What drew you to tarot?
So again, basically it just happened. I was very, very sick. I suffered with anxiety and PTSD, and I had issues. So a friend of a friend suggested me to meet this person who is in holistic therapy, and he does all this stuff with psychology and mind body kind of stuff, to make it
Hmm.
very simple and quick.
Yeah.
And one day we were talking about psychology and archetypes in psychology and just way to cope with stuff. And she mentioned tarot, since I was talking about astrology and other stuff before. And she made me pull a card from a deck. My first time seeing tarot ever. And I pulled this card randomly. And what card was that? The death card. I freaked out in that moment because I was actually sick and I was very scared.
Yeah.
And so that was not really the most uplifting message, at least on surface level.
Hmm.
And then I was explained that the death card is actually the closure for something bad, for the opportunity to have a rebirth into something better. So it's like, oh, I like this. This is intriguing. This is not what it seems. And I got really intrigued. I got myself the first tarot deck and I started doing one card a day just to start
Hmm.
learning the meanings and the cards and the archetypes. And it all went from there.
Okay. Did you follow like a specific interpretation of the tarot deck, or because I mean I know there's like all kinds of like, if you go into like the occult, you have all these different people that build their own like how to interpret the tarot deck, and did you follow a specific one, or did you also like look at different ones and pick the ones that work for you?
I definitely look at different ones. I mean, there's the Rider Waite Smith tarot deck that is the traditional one, let's call it. And most tarot decks that are even modern ones are based on those kind of symbolism and
Mhm.
meanings. But even when you pick very different tarot decks and you look them up on the internet, because you don't really, there are so many videos right now that you can just compare and contrast decks
Mhm.
on decks, and it's very fun for me, especially with my interest in illustrations and graphics and all of
Of
that.
course.
And you see at the end that the archetype that belongs to each card is quite the same. And what changes is the way you go about explaining it.
Mhm.
So that's fascinating to me because really encompasses the meaning of an archetype that is a little bit more of just a definition. So I guess that going on with the years of using tarot, I made up my own set of meanings that derive directly from the archetypes, but it's my way to explain that. And I even made a little quick booklet for myself to have in my phone whenever I need to check something up.
All right. Have you painted? That's like just a quick aside before we go into like more
Yeah,
of the tarot stuff. Have you actually drawn your own tarot deck at this point, or is that
I
something you
want
want to
to.
do?
I only did one card. I only did the strength card because last year a friend of mine basically told me, "Hey, there's this collab on Instagram. Everyone is trying to recreate a single tarot card for this collab, and we are trying to make a deck." And yeah, I joined, and among the three cards was the strength card, which is actually the card related to Leo, and I'm a Leo, so I picked that because why not? And I redesigned that. And since then, I want to do a tarot deck, but I quite have not decided what direction I want to go illustration wise.
Mhm.
So I'm trying to think about that.
Cool. All right.
Yeah.
So you said you started by just like drawing one card per day and, go with the meanings and sort of as your like guiding theme for the day, or just to familiarize yourself with the deck?
It was more a familiarizing kind of thing, just
Mhm.
wait, like when you learn a language that you try to
Mhm.
do a little bit every day so you don't get overwhelmed.
Lucky you. I usually like push those things off until I had a deadline and then pushed everything in
Yeah,
as hard
that's
as
my
brutal.
approach often in, yeah, that's what I tend to do. So since I'm very aware that I'm
Mhm.
go in or just do nothing at all, I tend to try and force myself to delay stuff in that way. Not always work. This time it worked, so that was great.
Awesome, awesome. All right, so you already spoke about like the archetypes, and you recently made that video about archetypes and tropes, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Um, yeah, and my question now is like, how much of like when you talk about archetypes, how deep did you go into like the whole Jungian philosophy, psychology, whatever mess that is?
I personally did not go much about that. I
Mhm.
know about that. It was kind of told to me, as I was saying, the concept of archetype was first introduced to me by someone that studies psychology and that
Mhm.
is a therapist. So I had a very soft introduction to all that shit there. And I decided to not dip my toes into that much more because
Mhm.
it was enough for me, let's say. Um, there was also a book that was recommended to me that is called Goddesses in Every Woman by, let me, Jean S. Olin, something like that. I have it behind me, so I was checking because I never remember the name. But it's a cool book because it takes mythological archetypes about the gods and the goddesses
Mhm.
and use them as psychology stuff.
Mhm.
That has also helped me understand what an archetype could mean in a way. So I guess a lot of examples are really what took me into considering archetype for what they are to me
Mhm.
now. That
Ah,
makes
okay.
sense.
Yeah, that's a good approach. Now, another one before we go into more like the fantasy and reading side. A lot of this, like you call yourself a witch, and there is obviously a um, like an emphasis when you talk about witch. Although there are male witches, there's always a connection between the witch and the female, and for you to take up that name sort of in defiance of what your problems with the church in the beginning is like, how much of you delving into that is something that you would call feminist also, just like for an interesting.
Well, I never directly saw the term witch, not for myself. I mean, the way
Mhm.
that I use witch is, as I said, more a cheeky term that I use
Yeah, I
because
know.
yeah, I I do strongly believe in feminism in a way that is not the internet craziness that we see nowadays a lot. So I want to make that clear that feminism for me is not, oh my God, women are the best, yada, yada, yada. No. I think that feminism is striving for equity among men and women and all those in between. That's what we should talk about, in my opinion. And I'm very aware that women and men have different issues, even normally in life, but we're getting into another whole kind of discourse there. Of course, I do support women, and I do believe that we all should have equal rights and opportunities. But it's a tricky word, even that one, because especially of the internet, if I may
Of
say.
course. Now, I was like just thinking, because you have, when you especially look at like the last, I don't know, 70 years, or like, what started with like the New Age movement, you have a lot of this focus on witchcraft and the female power and magic and stuff like that. And I was just wondering if that's something that plays a role for you at all or not.
I don't know. I think that, yeah, even even in back in the days and all of that, yes, you had the female energy, but you also had to have the male energy. It's part of the whole thing. I can't say that you should pick one on top of the other. It does not really make sense to me. Even like yin yang stuff, it's all a mixing together of different stuff.
Okay. Oh, sure. All right. Now let's look a bit more into like the reading part. So you said you already did like a lot of, like, not a lot, but you do like readings of where will specific series go and stuff like that. You did one for Malazan. How do you feel about your readings at the beginning, now that you have been a couple of books in?
So the thing that most surprised me when I did my first reading about Malazan was that, I think I even said that in a video, I was expecting a lot of fire and earth related cards, so wands and pentacles, because I was expecting like an epic fantasy. So yeah, that kind of energy. Instead, I got a whole bunch of cup cards, which is emotional cards. And I had a little bit of a moment of, why is that? That's not what I'm expecting. And after reading Guardians of the Moon was the first time that I heard people say, oh, Malazan is all about empathy and compassion. And that clicked for me right there. Especially, I'm not going to go into spoilers, but what I want to say is that especially when I finished the Memories of Ice, I understood what they meant there.
Yeah. Yeah, just wait until you finished something like Reaper Scale.
I mean, House of Chains destroyed me, so I can't wait.
Yeah. Oh, well, House of Chains has at least a real bona fide witch in there.
House of Chains has a lot. And back to the talk of archetypes. Funnily enough, I always describe the devil card as chains. And I really see that a lot in the concept of the House of Chains as like a house of the devil card, and the chains, the thing that chain people and block people, and your blockages, your traumas, and your shit that you carry with you, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like what was it? 800 pages of explanation of a single tarot card in a way. That was pretty cool.
All right. Yeah. Well, I can't wait for you to finish the rest. I mean, you now finished Midnight Tides, right?
I have yet to start it because I am moving and all that stuff. I'm not really having much time to read right now.
All right. Well, there's going to be things. So it's like, I mean, we can, I mean, I don't mind us doing like spoilers up to House of Chains, but I'll just try to not say anything beyond that to not spoil you.
Thank you. So there was something specifically that you wanted me to touch on about spoilers?
Not really. I just thought about like what you thought of the character. Is that House of Chains? No, that's not House of Chains. Oh, oh, you're gonna meet the real witch much later. I'm confused once again. But so my question is, like, so you did the reading, and now you then later on you realized that all the cup cards for emotions made a lot of sense. But you also talked a lot about, at least that's I like about the deck of dragons and those readings and those divinations that are made
Yes.
within the book.
Yes.
And what do you think of those?
So I was absolutely enamored with the first time that I met the deck of dragons, because the way that Erickson was going about the reading itself in the book
Mhm.
felt very accurate to what I, a person that reads tarot, would have said if I had those writing skills, which I don't. But in an ideal world where I could write like that, that's exactly the way I would go about it, which was beautiful and made me really, really happy. Um, I thought that was also very, very cool how we saw during the story how those readings were kind of coming to life and who represented what and all of that.
Yeah.
So that was one part of it. And about what you think about your reading after you read the books, I also did a reading about the deck of the dragons itself. And
Yeah.
there was a part while I was making that reading, doing that reading, that something came out, and I knew it was something that I was reading about in Memories of Ice. And I had to kind of stop the video and make a spoiler section because I had to talk about that and my thoughts about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So you said like the readings of the deck of dragons as described by Erickson are very much like how reading tarot works for you. So, it's not like a specific, this is how the future will shake out, but it's more like these aspects, these archetypes are very active right now and in relations and so forth.
Yeah. If I had to explain what reading tarot means to me, is that it is more reading into a specific group of energies or a single energy or whatever you want to call
Mhm.
it. So it's more a deep dive rather than a way of uncovering the unknown or the future.
Mhm.
It's more seeing what you don't see already. It's a tool to connect with something that is not that obvious, that is not on the surface like that.
Mhm.
And that's why for me it works even with books and series and stuff like that, because it's more about what you are not aware of, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Yeah, sure. That makes a lot of sense. um, have you encountered similar like things in other fantasy series? Like, I mean, there's a lot of like prophecies and divination stuff going on in all kinds of fantasy series.
Yeah, definitely. Prophecies and all of that, I very much like them when they are more cryptic, but then they end up making sense later on. If, I don't know if I'm explaining myself, but
Mhm.
I mean, I can't think of an example right now. But there are a lot of prophecies that are just too straightforward. Like I'm thinking Harry Potter right now. It's just too straightforward. Oh my God, yes, I know what you're talking about. That's so obvious. That's not even funny to me. That it's not funny. You don't have to put in the thinking. It's just okay. This is going to happen or not gonna happen. I like it more when you have to try and figure out what were really meant.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, of course. I mean, there's obviously that old saying that prophecies are as vague as possible, so you can, like, everyone can find meaning in them.
Yeah,
That's
that's
a that's
also
a
true,
cynic approach.
but undeniable one. So
Of course. Yeah, of
and
course.
see, I have even read tarot cards for people that are absolute skeptics, and they just want me to fail. Which, I mean, if that will flow your boat, go ahead. For me, it's fine.
I always do.
After all, I have fun.
I
And
mean,
one of those people is actually my stepdad, and he is a terrible skeptic, and I absolutely love him. And sometimes I read cards for him, and he gets really upset when I am awfully spot on. And after a couple of hours, he comes back. That card that you pulled was actually exactly what was going on.
that's
Sometimes
that's
that
funny.
happens, and it's fun.
Yeah, it's like I never got that. It's like, if you want them to fail, why go about it? Because that's not how this works. If you don't believe in it, then just don't do it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that when I say skeptic, at least in his way, is more someone that likes to question things and not completely be okay. So there's that. You're telling me that, I'm going to trust that. And I can appreciate the questioning aspect of it all. So
Of course.
when it's done with still a loving kind of background, for me, it's all good. When it's malicious, it's different.
Yeah, of course. That's like, I mean, I guess the malicious part is then once again that same like cage of like how to use the word there, but the same thing that already was a problem when you came up against like the church is like they don't want you
Yeah.
to do something. They're like, no,
Yeah.
this is bad, this is stupid. Stupid is
Either
for a
that,
lot.
or even
Yeah,
when people want to call you a fraud or
yeah,
crazy or something like that, that is malicious. That I don't like. If you
yeah,
just want to play with it and see where it goes, I'm fine with it.
yeah, of course. I get, but I mean that's like the way to actually go about it is just play with it, because if you're
Yeah,
taking it too seriously, you can also,
absolutely.
which I think is so interesting when you look at once again to come back to Malazan, when you look at Fiddler and Hedge, right? How they use the deck.
I mean, tarot was born as a card game,
Of
so
course.
you can't be mad at any of that. That's
Mhm.
how it was born. And some people that read tarot, even if you just browse YouTube for tarot readings, you will see that some people use actual poker cards as tarot cards.
Yeah.
So it's all of that. And also, there is not only tarot, there are also oracle cards. And I do use a deck of oracle cards. Oracle cards are different because they are not, they do not follow a structure as a tarot deck does. They
Yeah.
can be anything. They can be any number of cards. They can be related to anything at all. The ones that I have are related to the moon and moon phases and all of that because I like the moon a lot. But you can have one just on cats or I don't know, flowers or tea, whatever, or beer. I should make an oracle deck on beer.
Oh God, that would be well, I will certainly try that one. Yeah.
So yeah.
So yeah, that's like the other thing that I found interesting. What Erickson does there is like, yeah, they use the game, they basically use the cards to play with, but even through the play they do, they still get some meaning out of that. It's like,
Yes, absolutely. But I think that is more about Erickson's skills there than anything else, because he is able to make you focus on a, a part of the game rather than another one and see that, if that makes sense. I'm not
yeah,
sure.
that's part of it, certainly. um yeah, that's certainly part of it, I would say. um the other thing there though is obviously that is something that we as humans tend to do in general, right? We play games or whatever. We are trained, like not trained but wired, basically we're basically wired to find patterns, and then because that's like part of our nature as humans is to discover patterns in seemingly random things. And then when we have that, the other bit that we do is, because we think in narratives as people in general, like we think of our lives not as like a series of random events, but we think of them as like a narrative. Not a really interesting one, but for most people, I guess, but
Yeah.
certainly as a narrative. And once you combine those two things, you see patterns, whether they are there or not doesn't matter. You see those, and then you slot them into that greater pattern that is your life's narrative, and that's how you come from. We use these playing cards, and suddenly there's meaning there that wasn't there before.
Yes, and if I can expand on this a little bit,
Sure.
as a whole, I do believe in what we can call the universal energy, and that we are all part of that. And in a way, it's also pretty scientific. I mean, energy is there. We everything we do is energy and
Mhm.
produces or uses energy. So in a way, we can stand on the same ground there, at least as a starting point. But what I'm trying to say is that you can kind of attune your energy to what you would like to get closer to, or you would like to achieve, or something like that. And some people call this a law of attraction. Some people call that manifesting. You can use whatever term you like, or none at all. The concept is that for me, and personally, I do believe in this, you can put yourself closer and closer to what you would like to be, become, achieve, all that stuff. And doing so will also put you in a situation where you are more likely to encounter things that are related to you or to whatever you are looking forward. And that's why I say always that I do not really believe in coincidences, but rather I believe in synchronicity. So things that are happening because not really they are supposed to happen, but because they kind of align, if that makes sense. I know that I say if that makes sense a lot. I'm sorry.
No, I think it makes sense. I guess it's a combination of that, and also that if we think ourselves or will ourselves in a specific direction, we are more likely to notice things happening that align with
Absolutely.
that thing.
But
And
also,
yeah,
if you stay with the idea of, let's call it manifesting low attraction for
mhm,
simplicity's sake. For example, someone tells you, oh, the number 11 has such a big meaning in your life. You are starting thinking 11 all the time and focusing on
exactly.
11, and you're going to see 11 everywhere. But also, in another way, you're probably shifting your, let's call it energy, towards the 11 kind of thing. So you are both focusing on that
Yeah.
and even attracting that in your life. So it's going to be a combination, then it's going to be huge. And when we do that with negative stuff, then it's a mess.
Oh yeah. Yeah, but I guess that's the point. It's like it's right now it's very difficult for us to say how much of that is us just seeing more of these patterns that we are like looking for, and how much of that is us willing those things into being. So not into
Yeah.
being, but that's sort of like the big mystery, I guess, in there.
Yeah, I can agree with that, definitely.
Mhm. All right, let's get back to the like deck of dragons and like other like divination things, like prophecies. You said you like the more like vague ones, but is that
Not,
some?
not necessarily vague ones, but not completely obvious. I guess I also really like the idea of, like in a deck of dragons, when you have, I want to call them symbols or just
Mhm.
characters that are not defined as what they are currently in the story, but you discover them to be that part of the prophecy.
Yeah.
I like that level of mystery rather than necessarily being vague.
All right. Yeah, that makes sense. The mystery, of course. Um, so, but Arya already said that you also use crystals and got yourself a pendulum. But most of that is like more like the I don't know, divinatory magic, I guess, in a way. Although crystals do other stuff,
I
obviously.
mean, crystals, I was personally fascinated with them because they are very cool and pretty to look at. And
Yeah, it helps.
I was like walking past this crystal shop that also had all little geodes and stuff. Like, it was not like a witchcraft kind of place. It was just a place selling that stuff. It
Mm.
was nothing that special. And I would just spend half an hour on the windows watching those little crystals because I just found them so pretty.
Yeah.
And that's how it all started with that. Then later on in life, after I got into astrology and tarot and all of that, I learned that crystals had also other meanings. And I just found that really interesting because I was drawn to them. But I don't use them for anything too specific, rather than sometimes they have kind of a comforting vibe, but I don't know what it is about them personally. And I do not even study what they mean specifically. I just know that sometimes it's something that works for me. I guess that's all.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So, are you at all like interested in like more like traditional, like folk traditions, folk magic and stuff like that?
I love all those stuff like legends and all of that.
Mhm.
I think I was mentioning to you that my mom read to me all the Arthurian legends and many versions of those when I was a kid. Those were the stories that I was told. And since I was the only one different in the family, like in colors and features and all of that, she was always saying that I probably was a changeling. So those were all the things that that I grew up with. And also, I am from Venice, but I spent at least a third of my childhood in the mountains in the Alps, especially specifically in the Dolomites.
Okay.
And there are a lot of legends here. And since it's not as a city-like urban kind of life, still a lot of older and rooted in paganism traditions
Yeah.
are still alive here. And I love all of that. And it's a fun mix of, people are very, very strict about going to church on Sundays mornings and still practice all of that in daily life. And I really love that.
Yeah. I feel I mean, that's like, I guess, an interesting thing there, like this mix of like how you have like, and this is something that comes back to the Malazan thing on another side as well, is how when Christianity came, and especially the Catholic Church, that how they incorporated those traditions, or like knew how, like, when to look away and let those pagan things just go as well, as long as people also showed up on Sunday in Sunday church. And this is very,
Yeah.
very, very similar to what you see with like the Malazan Empire when they go somewhere, right? They impose their structure, their organization, which is, something that the Catholic Church, whether you like them or not, brought to a lot of these places, was like organization, structure, bureaucracy, like the positive aspects of bureaucracy, because even though bureaucracy in general can have a lot of negative sides, having none of it can also be problematic. They brought all of these things.
But they had to do
yeah.
some kind of compromise, because otherwise they were going to butt heads with people.
Mm-hmm. I guess it's more like, in that case, it was more like an ideological colonialism or conquest, and not so much like a physical one, because at least with the Alps and the Dolomites people, they didn't need to show up with armies to do that.
No.
I think they were also such,
yeah, and I don't even think they care much about that part of people there, because they are so not many people. And still a lot of stuff here is a mixed bag of cultures, because it's on the confine of Italy with Austria and Slovenia. So there's a lot of mixed stuff here in this specific tiny little area.
Yeah. That's true. I'm sorry, I have friends in Slovenia, and I think about their pagan roots.
No, what I'm saying is that this specific Chinese space in Italy, that I think was not as involved in the process, because it was just so far, it was less important.
Exactly, it was out of the way. No one actually cared about what people there believed, as long as the tithe came in.
And also, I don't think that the confines were so clear back then. So maybe it was a little bit of in and out. I don't know.
Oh yeah, that's a definite thing there when it comes to these kind of things. When you look back at, there's this amazing history study, like microhistory study, about the Inquisition protocols from like the heresy trials from in this case, it was in the Pyrenees, not in the Dolomites, like 14th century. So the Inquisition went there because they were looking for some kind of heretics, and they interviewed the entire village basically. And we have all those protocols. And the interesting thing there is, like, everyone in that village believed something else, and all of them thought that they were like really good Christians. Even the priest in that village has like very odd beliefs in there. And to see that document is like, it, for a long time, religion, like before like general literacy and a lot of other things, even something as the Catholic Christianity was very, very individual, because people just mixed all these things. They're like, yeah, but as long as I go to church on Sunday, and get at least one host per year, I'm fine. I'm a good Christian.
I mean, I can always do all the things that I want to do. I'm just going to confess it all, and it's going to be fine.
Yeah, yeah, but that gives people a lot of freedom in a way within a structure, obviously.
I mean, that's a little bit of hypocrisy if you ask me, but yeah, that's true.
I mean, that's not exactly how it should be, like from the church's point of view. I'm just saying that's, you know.
Yeah, no, you're very true. You're very right in saying that is the actual truth. But does it piss me off because it's hypocritical? Yes, kind of.
Of course.
Especially from certain people that tell me that it's not about, I don't want to generalize, but I know that sometimes I end up generalizing and that's not my intention. But I mean, hopefully I made myself understood.
Of course, I think so.
I mean, I hate when people generalize about witches and people who read tarot and all of that. So I try to not that to others. I'm not always successful, but I try.
Never mind. Okay, so let's go a bit more into like the Malazans. You have read like the first 4 books by now. Guardians of the Moon, Deadhouse Gates. What's your favorite so far?
I think that so far my favorite is Memories of Ice because all the parts in it really made me have a feel of what people were telling me to Malazan was going to be about in a way.
Well,
I don't know if I mean what.
No, I totally get it. I'm just saying there's one more side that's going to come up more prominently.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, probably there are going to be 1,000 more sides coming up. I mean, and I am also sure that upon reread, I'm going to discover 1,000 more stuff again about every single one of the books. So,
oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
So true. Memories of Ice was your favorite one so far?
Probably yes.
All right.
At this moment in time, I think that's the one I would say.
Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense. You already said that House of Chains was, I mean, you made a whole video on House of Chains and your experience with House of Chains, so I don't want to rehash all of that, but it's like, you already said that it was very much for you like an explanation of the devil card in tarot.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. It was also very, very emotionally exhausting for me to read in a good way, in a more of a cathartic way, but still hard stuff to go through. And I thought it was absolutely brilliant what Erickson did with the beginning and Corsa and how it all changed later on. And maybe that also kind of, I was less interested in the more typically Malazan part of the soldiers and all the things moving. It was less interesting to me than it had been in the previous books because I was very, very involved in that first section and in that evolution of character, let's say.
Yeah. Well, Karsa is certainly a very interesting character, and I just find it always super interesting when you remember that you meet him for that 1 second in Deadhouse Gates, and he's so he comes across so differently because we see him through Kalam's eyes in Deadhouse Gates, right?
Yeah, and I think that was the moment when my brain just had a moment of glitching because I was reading the last page of book of what it was. No, chapter 4, not book 4. Last page of book 1, chapter 4, when he is called Toblakai for the first time, and I was like, no, you did that.
Yep, that's certainly interesting. That's true. All right. So that's like, I guess, like another thing that I found interesting about like the deck of dragons, where the deck of dragons represents like, this is sort of where we come back to the tarot thing, I guess, in a way. So the deck of dragons, now that you've read Memories of Ice and House of Chains, and the deck has a master, the reciprocity, that's a word, man. The reciprocity between, or like it goes both ways, right? The deck of dragons imposes structure on these like different energies or whatever you want to call them, these different archetypes and houses. And on the other side, these houses then also obviously impose their will in a way on the deck of dragons. And how do you see that? How does that, compare to how you use tarot and how you think of tarot?
Well, it's not even much about how I use tarot, but even tarot as a structure. So it is divided, first of all, in major arcana and minor arcana. Major arcana are those like death, the sun, the star, the moon, the magician, all that stuff. And they represent kind of bigger, like larger, more complex concepts. Well, we have the minor arcana, and they are divided in 4 parts, which are one for each element. So cups is water, wands is fire, pentacles is earth, and swords is air. And all of them refers to something specifically. So for example, water, emotion, and pentacles, realm, physical realm of things, stuff like that. And all of those are again divided in ace to 10, and then page, knight, queen, king. So there is a very defined structure in tarot, and even all the decks that stray away from the traditional Rider-Waite Smith, they keep that structure when it's tarot. So I really like the idea of seeing the deck of dragons building its structure, because it did not have the House of Chains where we met it the first time, and now it is kind of growing. And I found that super fascinating. This idea of the master of the deck intrigues me a lot, and I'm not sure where it's going, but I really want to know. And I also like the fact that we were meeting characters in House of Chains that were kind of proclaimed as part of the deck suddenly. Like, you are going to be the Knight of Chains. No, I don't want to be the Knight of Chains. Well, you are the Knight of Chains now. So, that was fun. That was
We'll see how that turns out in the end.
Yeah, we'll see.
I heard he's not the most willing Knight of Chains.
No.
But see, that's like, I guess that's like the big thing, the idea of adding cards. You just like went through the entire like tarot deck, but I know there's also some people who use tarot decks with additional cards for whatever reasons. And that's like a thing that continues within the Malazan world, that as the world changes, the deck also has to change over time. Like,
but I have to imagine that while what we know today as tarot deck, which is made of 78 cards, maybe it was not always like that. Probably for sure it was not that. It was stuff adding up and then changing, and now it's what it is because it's been so long. But probably back then the same thing happened to tarot, or similarly. I mean, I guess there was not a people got there, but
do you think that's like maybe a result of how our culture or civilization has sort of solidified in a way over the last, I don't know, century and a half, with like mass media and stuff like that? Because suddenly everyone in, like, at least the global West to start with and so forth, had access to the same interpretation of the tarot deck, where you have originally you have like localized versions of.
I think that is a lot. Yes, I would totally agree with that. Also, as we were saying before, it was a time when confines in states and countries were not clear, but also, especially with stuff like paganism, and it was not written, like there was not a Bible for that. There was not a text. People were orally like telling things, and it was shared knowledge. But if someone did not share that, then it was going to die there. So I think that a lot of that has to do with exactly the fact that we now write stuff down, we mass produce stuff, and we sell stuff. Yeah, it changed.
now you make a video on YouTube and explain how to use tarot, and you get like, and you have like a different idea, you get like 500 hate comments that tell you that you're dumb and ugly to boot, because that's always important.
So some people just don't like people not thinking exactly like them, because
so you're not holding fast to your version of the tarot and say this is how it's going to be for the rest of my life. You would be open to add another card if you're like okay.
I mean, we can add even another element if you want it and have like a fifth suit of cards. I don't know what that would be, but that would be fun.
Very cool. Yeah, and that's what I find so interesting about the deck of dragons is how it evolves over the series and how things change. Suddenly you
Yes.
have another house, and suddenly the roles shift, and suddenly someone is one of these people, or maybe no longer, and you're like, okay. So at some point, I don't know, Whiskey Jack is Mason of Death, and I'm pretty sure he's no longer that in House of Chains.
Yeah.
And how these things, switch around. That's, I guess, yeah, the idea that nothing is fully stable, and stability, especially when it comes to like something that is so much a representation of the universe,
Yeah, absolutely.
it has to evolve constantly, I guess.
Yes, I totally agree with that. So, I mean, I cannot wait to see where this goes in Malazan world, but yes, I am absolutely on the same page with you there.
Very good. So outside of Malazan, what would you say are your favorite books when it comes to representations of magic and stuff like predictions or divination? I think sounds better in this case. Your like
Hmm.
tarot or other things to look at the world.
I think straying away for a second, just a little bit, probably my favorite representation of, let's call it witchcraft, would be the Winter Night trilogy by Catherine Arden.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a fantasy historical retelling of medieval Russia, where there's this main character who's a girl that basically still has a connection with all the little pagan creatures of the house and nature and all of that. But there's also Christianity coming in, and it's a beautiful, whimsical story with a great atmosphere that I love atmosphere in books. So I was already sold on that. But there's a lot of traditional folklore that is put into those books and a lot of discussion. I also have a friend who is Bulgarian that has read those books, and she said that even the folklore parts were really accurate and she really loved it. So those are books that I absolutely loved, and I
Mm-hmm.
always really like them. And there's also a lot of this nature related magic, which is my favorite thing. So probably I connect with those a lot for that reason also.
I see. Okay.
And I'm trying to think about something that contains good divination or good stuff like that. Personally, I can't think of anything right now. And maybe that's also why I was so excited about reading it in Malazan, because it was the first time that I was reading not only just well done, but also clearly referring to that.
I mean, there's like other ways of divination within Malazan as well, right? You have the situation where in Memories of Ice, exactly, where Hetan and her brothers, or her one brother at that point, are doing that divination with that shoulder blade from whatever animal they took it at that point, where
Yeah.
you burn it and then you see the cracks and you use that for divination, stuff like that.
Yes.
So there's a lot of other ways how they use what they use for divination. Some of them
Yes.
like clearly rooted in real world traditions, but
Yeah. Yeah. But also, maybe I'm remembering this wrong. I might remember that in the beginning of even Guardians of the Moon, when the all sorry things happen, the old woman says something about a prophecy or a divination thing. And there was another moment that I cannot remember, but I'm not sure what really happened there because I was still in my very, very early Malazan days and I was still in the biggest confusion ever.
well, there's reasons why we all read it more than once.
Yes, I can totally see that. Let me
Yeah.
think. I am blanking. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, never mind. See, you already said like the nature magic or like natural magic is something that you're very interested in, and like
Yeah, that's always my favorite.
so I guess your favorite mage right now is Bottle.
Wait. Can you repeat the name?
Bottle. He shows up in House of Chains. He's the one.
I just stuck with names. And
all right, he's the one in Fiddler's Squad, the young one who.
Oh, okay. I have not got really attached yet, so I can't say that is my favorite. But I mean, that book was a little weird, as I told you. That whole section with the soldiers and all of that,
yeah.
I was less attached to. So, but it's all good. I have no complaints, let's say, but I have not so attached yet.
All right. Yeah, sure.
And I'm honestly really, really bad with names. And since I am reading on my Kindle right now, and I'm also dyslexic, so sometimes I just fuck up names. For the longest time, I was calling Whiskey Jack Whiskey Jack because I was reading it fucked up.
Well,
and it took me 5 minutes to be able to properly read Anamanda Rake because I was not able to do so.
Well, I listen to the audiobooks, and apparently they get a lot of pronunciations very wrong. I mean, they
will
always,
never be safe.
They always say Malazan, and apparently that is not how you say it, because you say Malazan.
I mean, there's a lot going on there.
So, yeah, but what do you mean by nature magic? Is that something like outside of, I mean, tarot is not what I would call nature magic, but you said that's something you're interested in. Is that something that you want to do more of, or is this more just something that you want to learn more about? Because nature.
I guess both, in a way. The main thing about nature magic is that a lot of even what is in tarot comes from observing nature sometimes and most time, but even human nature, not only like nature, even human nature. And I think that that's the most interesting part of that, when you are able to kind of come back to an archetype or a meaning that you don't really understand just by observing, in a way.
Yeah.
And I really like that. I also like the idea, and this is something that I would like to learn more of, about all the little things that already are in nature that can benefit you in many ways. Even just using this kind of flower for that is helpful. Like, I mean, I drink chamomile all night long because I can't sleep. So we can call that a magic potion if you want. But it can be as simple as that, or even just traditions similar to that I really like and enjoy, and I find them interesting.
So that's like, once again, one of those where like magic and nature also meet up with folklore and traditions, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I just had something that I wanted to say, and then I completely blanked on it, and I don't know what it was. Anyway, like, oh yeah, right. There was a book that I'm not sure if you have read it, because I want to read it, and I think it's perfect for you. It's by someone called Elizabeth Hand, who I really respect for other stuff, and she wrote a book like early on called Draw Down the Moon, which is urban fantasy.
I have not read it.
You have not read it. It's
I have
urban
not read
fantasy,
it, but I need to look it up for sure.
Well, it includes your very own Italian special witches.
Wow.
It's urban fantasy, but it includes the Benandanti, and I'm like very much interested in finding out what she writes there, because the other stuff that I've read from her
I'm definitely going to look it up.
Yeah. That was not what I wanted to say, but now I'm going to read it at some point. I'm not sure if I'm going to be very critical about it, but I'm sure it's going to be good.
Oh well. You're probably more critical than me about books, so that's good.
I don't know. It can
I mean,
it can certainly impact your enjoyment of books. I can tell you that. That's like, okay, let's go back to that like nature thing. Is that something that you find like well represented in Malazan, or not so much? Because
I don't think there's a big focus on nature for me yet. I mean, it's not the thing that pops up for me among all the things that are in Malazan. There are a lot of beautiful and amazing descriptions that I stop and reread, but that's more atmosphere to me rather than a big focus on nature, at least so far for me.
Yeah, but you have like in Memories of Ice, you have that whole part when they go through the Barghast range and they meet the Barghast, and you have this description of Barghast magic and those things that are more like ritual.
Yeah, sure, but it was a part in one book out of
Yeah,
four that I read, so that's why I'm saying
true.
that is not one of the biggest
That's
things
true.
that caught my attention.
That of course is true. Yes.
Yeah, I was not saying that it's not there, just that I don't see it as one of the biggest things for Malazan right now.
Of course, of course. Well, there's all these other things that go on.
There's a lot of cool stuff. I mean, it's not lacking at all.
As Iskar Jarek always says, there's always lasers and fireballs.
I was watching his videos today on why Malazan's pretty much for everyone, and he
He's
was
right.
saying, I mean, if you like magic, if you like lasers and fireballs,
Plus
immediately.
dinosaurs with swords. And if that doesn't get you, then I don't know. I mean,
I know. I mean, people always complain about fantasy books being basic and predictable, and oh my God, you always use elves and dwarves and all of that. Why can't you get creative? Read Malazan, for fuck's sakes.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Does not get more creative than that.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I think we're sort of at the end of our wits. Once again, I really want to thank you for doing this today, and just want to thank you for this.
Thank you for having me and for introducing this idea to me, and hope I did not disappoint.